Hello friends, and welcome back. So I suppose you're wondering, why am I in this barrel? Well, I'll tell you what, this barrel can fit so many, no, it can fit one. It can fit one suit-up Sam. No, not even one suit-up Sam, I can't get down. This barrel can fit half of a suit-up Sam in it. But you know what, I found this barrel just lying around in our garden. It was actually buried under about 2 or 3 bushes and I had to dig this thing out. It was half filled with sand, but it got me thinking. If this has been left discarded in our backyard for God knows how long since we lost it, can I breathe some life back into it, and can I get it to serve the garden in which I found it? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this barrel, well first I'm going to get out of the barrel and give it a good clean down, but then I'm going to see if I can turn this barrel into a compost turner, or a composting barrel of some sort. I'm going to have to put it on a frame, I'm going to have to give it some mechanism to rotate so that we can aerate the compost that's going to be inside of it. I'm going to have to also incorporate some sort of mechanism that allows easy opening and unloading of all of this composting soil, because this is a 100 litre barrel. I don't even know how much this thing will hold, and it's going to be heavy, so it's going to have to be strong. So with that being said, I'm going to try and figure out how to get out of this thing, and let's get started. This is going to take forever. There's definitely a better way. Shenanigans aside, a high pressure cleaner was definitely the way to go to clear off this barrel. After finishing cleaning up the barrel, I wanted to move on to cutting all of the legs and general framework to size. So here I am trying to be as accurate as possible, and most of these are getting cut to about 1 meter in length. Because I'm impatient, this entire project is done without the use of glue. So just about everything that you see, the framework, the wheels when they go on, it's all going to be held in place by screws. So here I am drilling the holes that I'll be using and just assembling the framework to start with. In retrospect, I probably could have used glue as well as using the screws to hold things in place while it dried, but no, I did not think of that at the time, did I? As you can see, I clearly must be a professional. Look at that masterful use of clamps there, and get it up, good job. And don't drop it, you dropped it. Alright, so maybe not as much of a professional as I thought. What are you doing now? Ah, yes, smacking it from side to side will definitely assist in your cause. And so now, just in case you were wondering what I was trying to build, I'm going to give you a beautiful shot of the half-completed frame, and that amazing footage. What are you doing? Yep, that's a frame. Pretty sure anyone could put that together in their sleep. Alright, so with that Oscar award-winning cinematography out of the way, I'm just here marking out the plywood base so that I can cut along it. I'm just going to do that freehand with a circular saw, trying very hard not to cut off my fingers. I don't think I would like that very much, so I'm using clamps to keep things from moving around too much, but I cannot stress this enough, this is not a safe way to go about this task. But lo and behold, it actually fits, surprisingly, just with a couple of nudges in each particular direction. Brilliant. So I'm just going to use these timber blocks affixed to the base of the legs to help hold the plywood in place, just to keep it, elevated a little bit. So a couple of screws here and there should be fine. They're also going to come in handy later when I try to attach the wheels. Yep, fits the same as before, and a couple of screws just to hold that in place. Alright, so time for an update. I've been following my highly detailed diagrams and plans, and it turns out that in my rush to produce this, when I was cutting the legs at 1 meter and 1 meter and 1 meter and 1 meter, I thought to myself, well, I may as well cut the crossbeam at the same time, and so I just cut it at 1 meter, despite the fact that I'd written down multiple times it should actually be cut at 1.05 meters, because now I've assembled the whole thing, and since my truss supports for the barrel are going to be on this edge and also on this edge, as you can see, the barrel actually extends past those points. I can't fit this barrel onto my frame. What I'm gonna have to do is fix my problem by cutting this down the middle and just spreading this out a little bit further. But you know, what can you expect when you're making a composting bin out of spare parts that you find lying around in the shed? So I'm gonna try my best to fix up the problem that I've made for myself, and we'll see where we go from there. All right, so I've cut the meter long strip in half. I've got these 2 half-meter long sections, and I've also cut 2 sections of timber at 250 millimeters long. What I'm going to do is use these kind of like, put one in front, one behind, and then just screw those together to hopefully extend this by the required amount. In theory, it should work. I'll tell you what, hopefully has been the word of the day for this entire project. Right now, I'm just trying really hard to get this all screwed together and keep it straight whilst doing so, because if this is crooked at all, it's gonna cause me all sorts of troubles later on. But with a couple of screws, I've actually managed to do it. But then moving on to putting it back in place, you can see from the amount of fiddling around that I'm doing, I'm having a real hard time getting this done. What do you know? It fits! That's about good enough. Okay, so with my problems behind me for the moment, I've moved on to the truss supports, just cutting 2 pieces of timber with 45-degree angles and then lopping off the top to create a flat section. And then I'm going to stick them together with these galvanized plates. I know that's not what they're meant to be for, but like I said, I'm trying to avoid using glue, so it's good enough for me. Okay, now that I've got the truss pieces complete, I did another one of these for the other side. I'm going to now firmly secure them in place with some screws. That should give me a very firm base to attach the rod that the barrel itself is going to be rotating on. Let's just attach these and see what happens, because so far this is coming together quite nicely despite all of the errors that I've made getting to this point. But what can you expect? I'm working with subpar materials. This is just stuff that I found lying around, some odd screws, and the only things I really had to purchase for this project were things that I couldn't possibly have anticipated, like all the galvanized steel rods to create a rotating barrel mechanism and you know, a couple of extra latches to keep the barrel closed once it's all complete. But besides that, this is just stuff that I found lying around. Continuing in the theme of no glue allowed, I'm just going to screw these into place and then use more of these things. I believe they're called cleats, actually, the galvanized plates with nails in the back, of course. Miraculously, with the hammers flying, I still haven't really injured myself at this point. And because I was noticing some side-to-side movement in the framework, I also decided to add in these supportive 45-degree struts. And as I said before, adding those blocks to the bottom of the legs was not just there to support the plywood, but also to help in attaching these wheels. So now that the trolley's more or less done, I can forget about that for a moment. I need to focus now on getting the mechanism for turning the barrel in operation. What I've got are some scrap pieces of plywood, and I'm basically going to use these to strengthen each end of the barrel and then drill a hole through that the rod that it's going to rotate on can actually stick through. It's a pretty straightforward process. I'm going to put the barrel on top, as you can see, and then I'm going to draw a line around and cut very roughly around it, because this thing doesn't need to be pretty. And once again, here I am with my dangerous circular saw antics. Honestly, so surprised that I have not injured myself by this point. Like, how? But once I roughly had a circle, I then secured one side in place, and then with 2 kind of chisely things, really attempted to just jam that in there. But of course, you know, it didn't quite fit, so I had to go at it with a circular saw again. There was a lot of grunting and effort at this point, but I persevered and eventually somehow managed to jam that inside that rim, and then held it down with a couple more L brackets and screws. This end I have just screwed the plywood down, but on the other side, obviously I was trying to insert this plywood into the barrel. Now that was a whole lot of effort. I would not recommend doing that to anyone, but that is never coming out. That is very secure, and then I also put some L brackets around the 4 corners just to keep that really nice and in place and from moving. Now I've measured this barrel. It's about 48 centimeters across, so I need to find the center of these plywood pieces and drill a hole large enough for my piece of galvanized steel piping to go through. So I'm going to find the center. Basically, if I measure, what, 20, if it's 480, yeah, so if I measure 240 millimeters from each side and then do like a little arc, I should find the center, and then I just need to drill a hole, hope for the best. As you can probably guess, hoping for the best did not result in me finding the absolute center, but it was close enough, so I just expanded that hole till the pipe fit, and then, just looking down the pipe, I managed to find the hole at the other end and jam it on through. Through some miracle, the barrel actually fits there, and so just to keep that galvanized pipe from rolling off of the trusses, I'm holding it in place with these little brackets, one on each side. And then of course, since I can't spin the rod without a handle, I improvised one using a couple of 90-degree bends and shorter pieces of piping at one end, and then I simply capped off the other end to make sure no water got into the pipe. Alright, so I've currently got this thing spinning. It's, at the moment, just friction-based between the plywood and the rod, which is why if I start to spin it and stop, the barrel keeps going, but the handle stays stationary. I'm going to have to come up with some way to pin the rod to the barrel. I'm thinking I might just put a nail or something through the steel rod. It means I have to drill some holes, but if I put a nail through and then put some U-bolts across the nail into the plywood, that should stick it all together and mean that when the rod's turning, the barrel's turning. When the rod's stopped, the barrel stops as well. I don't know if it's going to work. I think it's going to be a little bit difficult to do, seeing as it's all in place at the moment, but I'm going to give it my best shot. What more can I do? But actually, before I do that, I'm going to get onto something a little bit more important. I'm going to put the hole in the side of the barrel that gives us access to the inside for loading grass matter and taking out compost when it's ready. To do that, I think I'm going to use an angle grinder, not really the tool for the job, but it's going to get it done a hell of a lot faster than some little hacksaw blade. So since I really didn't want to screw this up, I mean, once I put a hole in this barrel, that hole is there forever, I mark out pretty much where it's going to be and then just go at it with the angle grinder. I was very concerned that I would screw up at this point and that I would just errantly cut off in some direction, but fortunately, once the angle grinder bit into the plastic, it was really easy to just keep a straight line. Like, remarkably easy. I was shook. I might not recommend this as the best way. It would have been very easy for me to stuff up the project at this point, but it did work. And so after cutting my hole, I then went about fixing on the hinges that would hold the lid in place. I decided to use 3 hinges just to make sure that there were no gaps across the top section because I don't want my compost leaking out. And whilst I was at it, I also added the hinges that would actually keep this lid closed. It's no use without those. And because, like us, compost does need to breathe, I added these ventilation holes at either end. And by this point, I've also added that nail through the galvanized rod to allow easy rotation of the barrel. And lo and behold, it really works. I am so close to finishing this project at the moment, but I still needed to strengthen the front of the plywood because I've decided now how I'm going to enable access to the compost inside. I need to add a ramp to the front of my trolley, but in order to do that, the base actually needs to be strong enough to support it. So here I am just adding some strengthening pieces of timber across the front and then down the middle. This way the plywood will actually be strong enough to support a wheelbarrow filled with compost. So I was originally going to create a trough that would sit underneath the compost bin and allow the funneling of compost to, out around here somewhere that you could put a wheelbarrow underneath. That just seemed like far too much engineering effort, so I have strengthened this plywood base to the point where I'm pretty sure I could sit on that and it wouldn't break. The reason why is now what I can probably do is create just a very small ramp at the front here that you could actually push a wheelbarrow up onto, and that way, when you rotate the barrel so that the hole is directly below, you can just dump compost straight into your wheelbarrow and run away with it. It's a lot easier, and I think it's going to save me a lot of hassle. So basically, at this point, I think adding that little ramp will be the very last step before this compost bin is ready to start serving its purpose. I basically just created the ramp out of 2 pieces of plywood and 1 piece of thicker timber, and then attached that to the base of the trolley with 1 more hinge. Why not? This way I can pack it away when I'm not using it and then fold it out when I wish to. And now to test if this thing actually works. I filled this bin with about 30 odd tennis balls that I found lying around, and I genuinely hope that it dumps into the wheelbarrow like I've planned. Otherwise, I'm picking those up all afternoon. Tennis balls aren't the ideal stand-in for compost, but you get the idea. So with that little test out of the way, this seems to be in perfect working order. Obviously, I'm not going to be storing tennis balls in this long term. It's just that compost takes a while to develop, and since I didn't have any, I thought tennis balls were a pretty decent stand-in for demonstrating how the mechanics of this thing actually works. But that's how you can turn any old barrel that you find lying around your garden into a perfectly functional compost turner. The thing to keep in mind, this in that is how I have turned this barrel into a useful item that I can use to further my gardening habits. With that being said, I think I might go and try and find some kitchen refuse and some grass clippings that I can actually put in this, and in 6 weeks, who knows, I could actually have some compost, or I could just have a barrel full of smelly, half-degraded biomass. I don't know. Knowing my luck, it could be 50-50 either way. So I hope you've enjoyed this one. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and hit like if you enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys in the next DIY or whatever else I can come up with doing. Bye!